Great. I'd like to welcome everybody to our 8th podcast. I'm Paul Barron, broker, owner of Century 21 Leading Edge. And to my left is...
I'm Tassis Giannakakis, also a broker and owner at Century 21 Leading Edge. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, Anthony Bungaro, broker and owner at Century 21 Leading Edge.
There you go. So what I wanted to start with tonight is just talking about our last podcast. So I was watching that last podcast and I learned a whole lot by watching it. Yeah, I think that it was a great idea to have the mortgage guys on.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've had any feedback. We just posted that.
We posted it a couple weeks ago, but the feedback I've heard has been really positive, and we've got some people from their network kind of reviewing it. They've shared it, so I think there was a lot of value with that for sure.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the changes in the marketplace, and I'm obviously not selling real estate, and I found it very informative. Learned a lot by watching that podcast. So let's start talking about
Quite from the cheap seats.
talking about the market. So what are you guys hearing from the agents out there?
It's picking up. I think most of obviously the numbers were good for October. Those got released fairly recently. But the agents in general seem to be saying that the activity is there, much more so than it was 2 months ago. Oddly enough, I had someone say today, it's bizarre because we're moving the York Mills office, and he says, I was all set to get all my stuff organized, and all of a sudden this week I've had 4 people call me to list their properties. So he was shocked at the activity all of a sudden, right?
Yep.
I think that's all positive.
Well, that's Rob Vivian's story, right? When you're going to go on holidays, that's when people are calling you to do business and stuff like that. I forgot actually to introduce the wines. So let me just talk a little bit about the wines, and you guys can give some thought to the marketplace. So tonight we're trying for the first time from the Barron cellar is some white wines. So I do not drink a lot of white wines. I have probably 98% red wines in my cellar. And the white wines that I do drink are mostly Riesling, which is a white wine usually from Germany, also from France, a little bit of a sweeter wine. And then what I also really enjoy is Sauternes. So this first bottle that we're trying tonight is a bottle of Sauternes, and it is a Chateau Coutet, and it is a 2009. And Sauternes is an area in France, and it's also, you hear things referred to as Barsac and Sauternes. So this is a sweeter dessert type wine. Actually, Tass's wife's favorite wine when she comes over to dinner. And let's give that wine a try. It's very, very different. It almost can be a dessert on its own. Mm-hmm. So it is that sort of full-bodied, smooth. There's lots of texture to it. Yeah. It's not like a lot of white wines that are very almost watery. This is very oily in your mouth, I find.
I would say syrupy.
Yeah, syrupy.
It tastes very rich.
Yeah.
The texture.
And it's got that sweetness, like it is sweet. There's no doubt about that. But that's very different.
Yeah. So you listen to the French boys talk about that. They say it's got the honey. And it's got the honey, the pears and stuff like that in there. So very different. We also, because it's a sweeter wine, we probably don't want to drink too much of it, but a little bit. And then the next one that we're going to try is also a white wine, my second favorite white dessert wine, which is a Tokai, which is a white dessert wine from Hungary. I think that Hungary is really known mostly for Tokai. That is their main export wine that they sell, and it is a little bit different. And we'll wait till we give that one a try. Actually, I'll pour that one now, and we can actually try the two of them at the same time, and you guys can look at what the differences are. Maybe I'll get you guys to describe the differences, so you can start by seeing that it's not quite as oily or thick looking as the Sauternes.
Good.
Yeah, so we'll give that one a try. So while we're giving that a try, let's talk a little bit more about the market. What are you finding out there, Anthony, as you're sipping your wine?
There's some similarities to Tassis. We've had a number of agents saying that they're getting their calls in for their listings. There's been some multiple offers. And then I get the other side of the coin that I don't know if it's the seasonal time of the year or it's certain areas where they're not getting the activity and they're looking at, gosh, should I get price reductions? So I've seen both extremes, and statistically, there's no question. And when you see what's happening with the market, the numbers are up, the prices are up consistently since May.
I brought the stats, right? So
well, I like the stats guy to explain that, so I'll cut it short. But that's the two types of views I've had. I certainly like hearing the fact that there's still a couple isolated multiple offers, that listings, they're getting the listings because that's the theory. Get the listings now. When's the best time to sell? Now. So that part's good. But we've had a few pockets, guys, and I'm sure it's the same all over, where they're trying to figure out what can we do to get the property sold.
Yeah. I think the biggest adjustment has been the public adjusting their expectations, and also the agents educating the public that this is not 2017, this is the prices now, or 2016 or whatever, and having people accept. And I think sometimes that takes a little bit of time for them to absorb it, right? And I think that's what's happening. And the ones that are priced right are selling.
They're selling,
right? Yeah. Which is always the case. And I think that the realtors that are working are getting deals done.
Yes.
I think that if you have the attitude of there's business to be had, you'll go out and get it. Whereas if you think, hey, nothing's happening out there, I might as well go on vacation or stay home, then clearly nothing's going to happen, right? So
you are what you think about. Is that?
100%, 100%.
So just to go over the numbers, October 2018, number of homes sold is up 7.7% from September 2018.
Yep.
So month over month, we had 6959 sold in September and 7492 sold in October. So 7.7% increase. Average price on the month over month basis went from 796 to 807. So that's up 1.32%. So very, very, very healthy numbers. When we look at that on a year-over-year basis, last year in October, we had 7,069 sales, and then that's up to the same 7,492 October this year. So that's up 6% from last year in terms of the number of transactions. And then the overall price, when you look at comparing now year over year, we have the market adjusted in the middle of 2017. So you're not seeing a huge amount of adjustment now when you look at October last year to October this year. In fact, the average price last year, October 2017, was $780,000 and then up to $807,000. So 3.5% increase on a year over year basis. And I'll give you a quick rundown on the condo and the average price by category. So when we look at a year-over-year basis, the condo market went up 7.5%, the average price of a condo from 2017 to 2018. Average price of a townhouse was up 4.1%. The average price of a semi was up 6.6%. And the average price of a detached home was up 1% from last year. Now, what's interesting with that is that there has been a bunch of talk about the condo market leveling off, and the statistics bear that out. So when we look at September to October, we actually have a slight decline in the condo values, down 1.34%.
Yeah.
And again, when we look at a month-over-month change, you're looking at what sold. So it could be that smaller units sold. So there is other factors that come into there, but it does show a decline of 1.34%, probably indicating that our condo market is now leveling off. We talked about detached being up here and the condo market moving much closer, and maybe that's getting to be the right gap now, and then at some point in time you got to start thinking, well, maybe I'm better off to go with a detached or a house, right? And then when we look at the month over September to October 2018, the townhouses were up 3.4%, the semis were up 3.1%, and the detached houses were up 1.9% in terms of the value. And so that you guys know, we actually post these infographics on our website, on Facebook, and they're available if you email Don. And great thing to use in your social media, you know, talking about values, letting the consumer know what's happening in the marketplace. So a great tool to use.
Have them ready on your phone because it's the number one topic. You know, cocktail parties. Everybody wants to ask the realtor, "What's the market doing?" Well, by the way, here's the numbers, right?
Yeah, what are the prices doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
That's a great snapshot of it.
For sure. Another question that they tend to ask is they want you to get the crystal ball out and tell us what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
So I have the answers to that today.
Oh, I like that.
Right. I actually went to the TREB annual meeting and listened to my good friend Benjamin Tall, who's the CIBC market analyst, and I think always has amazing insight. He's on panels to talk to government, does stuff in the U.S.
Yeah.
Very, very good guy. So it's interesting because when you look at part of a conversation, right? Sometimes we get snippets in the news where you hear this thing, but it's maybe taken out of context, right? So I'm watching this presentation, I guess a couple of weeks ago, and he started by showing job growth and the fact that the number of jobs are way up in Canada. So the unemployment rate is considerably down. And then he showed a graph that said that every time that unemployment is very good or low unemployment rate, we tend to have a market correction. And he showed this graph, and it showed, 4 cycles where when that happened, there was a market correction. And then somebody at my table went to the washroom, and they went with the idea that, okay, Benjamin has just predicted that there's a market correction. And about 5 minutes later, he went on to say, but there's other factors that we need to take into account. Yeah. Okay? And then he started talking about the type of employment that has gone up. And he says that basically that low unemployment usually creates a lot of inflation. And when there's a lot of inflation, then the Bank of Canada is going to put pressure on rates. And the rates are going to go up. And when rates go up, that will tend to stall or lower prices. Now, what's interesting, he still predicts that we'll still have another 3 quarter-point raises over the next 6 to 9 months, right? And that will still happen. But when he started talking about jobs, he said, here's the difference. And then he started showing us some other graphs. And with these graphs, he was showing that, yes, unemployment is low, but who is getting the jobs? And it is the old boys, the old gals. So it's a lot of an older demographic that are getting these jobs. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, when older people get jobs, they're working on average 30 hours a week. He said this is Fridays off type of scenario. So unemployment rate goes down significantly, but they're only working 30 hours a week. That is a big factor because the average younger person is working 37 hours a week. The other factor that comes into play is when the younger workforce gets a job, they're in with the owners, trying to get increases, trying to move up, constantly trying to put pressure on wages and get more money, whereas the older people are not doing that. So even though you have the unemployment rate very, very low, you don't see that pressure on wages. Even with the adjustments that the government made on minimum wages and stuff like that, we have not seen that as a problem. So he says that when you take that into consideration, we really don't have the inflation to cause that continuous increase in the rates, and that he doesn't see that the market is going to go down to any significant amount. Now, the next thing that he talked about was his friend down in the States, Mr. Who's the president of
the U.S.?
States of the U.S.?
Oh, Trump?
Trump, okay. Yes, Trump. And, he said that Trump and the effect that Trump is going to have on Canada, because what they do in the States does affect us.
Of course.
And he feels that by 2020 or into 2019, the effect of these lower taxes on corporations are going to cause, he feels, a correction in the U.S. And he thinks that they will be in a slump as they go into the next election in 2020. And what happens is that our monetary policy with interest rates is really designed to keep interest rates or to keep our Canadian dollar low, right? Because that helps with trade and whatnot. But what happens is if the U.S. goes into a slump, they will lower interest rates. And if we were to continue to raise interest rates or not lower our interest rate, that would cause the dollar to go up. So he feels that the slump that's going to happen in the U.S. will ease pressure on interest rates here. In fact, they could go back down, and that the market will continue to be stable market in Canada for the next 3 to 4 years. That's what he's saying. And then he went on to say, and I think that we talked about this before as well, and I'm sorry I'm giving you the full scenario on this, but we talked about the investors buying condos and the fact that there's a negative cash flow when you're buying condos. They're not $800 a square foot, you're well over $1,000. And in fact, a condo is more per square footage than you're paying for a house in most cases, sure. Right? And that's just not sustainable. But the investors that are buying those, they're looking at it from a long-term standpoint. They're not looking at it as, I have $800 a month negative cash flow. They're looking at it as, I have a tenant paying for 3/4 of my mortgage. Yeah. And I'm not going to be able to afford that 10 years from now, so I better do it now. Yep. Yep. And that's still the philosophy out there. So we still have a good, solid investment market, even though values are higher. But we also saw with our stats for the month of October that those condo values are going to level off and maybe go down a little bit, which they probably need to do. But the market is good to go for the next 3 years. And long term in Canada, things are looking quite good. Obviously, there's many factors that can change that, but based on the information that we have, things are looking very positive. And I think that's important to probably try to look at a summary of that. I gave you the long version, but it's interesting because if you did go out of the room when he just showed that first graph and said, here's the 4 slumps that happened when this happened, all right, that's it. We're going into a slump. Yeah. But it's not always the case because there is exceptions to the rules. Yeah. There's other factors that come into play, right?
Very good. That's interesting. And if Benjamin Tal says so, then that's what it is.
Yeah, he is usually fairly accurate.
Yeah. He's a sharp fellow.
Yeah, I think he has a very good perspective on things, and I think that if you do ever get an opportunity to go out and see him, I would strongly suggest it. Right? We actually had him, I guess, last year at our kickoff meeting, which was well received, and I think it's good to get that kind of.
He's got great info, and he's a great presenter as well. So he's entertaining to listen to. Yeah. Which is half the battle, because then you're going to actually listen to him, right?
Attention.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how our agents are responding to Zillow and the launch that we did a couple of weeks ago. I think we did it after our last podcast where we launched with Zillow. Yep. So what kind of response are we getting from the agents and the consumers? Have we heard any feedback on that?
I think some confusion, obviously. I think that the agents are a little bit confused as to how it works, and obviously we've been working on educating them on that. Yeah. as is the public, but I think more so the agents. I think just having them understand that really it's an advertising venue and not a competitor to a real estate brokerage, I think was, again, to quote your friend Mr. Trump, fake news, right? So I think a lot of what they've been fed is those tidbits of information that makes them think that it's a competitor, but we know that it's not. It's really an advertising venue, right? And I think the people that get it, especially the agents that get it right away, are already starting to embrace it, having their profiles put up. I've had inquiries already as to how they can do more on Zillow, which hasn't happened yet in terms of the advertising. That's coming in the future. But again, the ones that understand it are quick to embrace it and say, "Hey, this is fantastic. How do I do more on it?"
That's right.
That's been the reaction.
Have you heard any feedback from agents, Anthony?
We certainly brought it up at the sales meeting yesterday, and to a lot of people, they understand that Century 21 took heed and was the first franchised organization. And so I tried to explain to them that this is actually something that you should be explaining in your listing presentation, and this is an advantage that you have, because it's not uncommon that sellers are doing their comparison shopping, and the advantage that we have at C21 is that we're at it, we're with Zillow. But it's a bit of an education, because when it's sort of new, they don't quite understand it. So, it's important for us to keep on to it and have them update their profiles. And I think more importantly, use it in their listing presentations, et cetera, because that is the advantage that we have compared to any other organization.
Especially, I think, in Toronto, right? Toronto is such an international city where we have people moving here from all over the world. And the bottom line is, maybe not so much Canadians, but international people are already aware of Zillow. That's obviously right. American people, but even internationally, the amount of traffic that they get from international buyers going on there, looking for product. Toronto is a hotspot for people all around the world, and now the Century 21 listings are on there. So that is fantastic, right? You're getting that exposure to the international buyer.
And I enjoyed the presentation we had, which was important, so that I'm in a better position to explain it. But my analogy is, you mentioned the U.S., it's like the word Kleenex is the first word that comes to your mind when you want to blow your nose on tissue. And the thing is, in the U.S., let's Zillow it. And this is a normal thing. Let's get a Zestimate. And this is something it's going to take time, because it's just basically been launched. But as time flies, and once we get through 2019, this is what the goal is that not only our agents...
It's definitely the powerhouse in the U.S.
Right. So we'll replicate it here, and I still repeat, it's a tool. And once they understand, as you mentioned, it's not a competitor, this is to generate leads. And that's what it's all about today.
Well, I think it's interesting, too, that Zillow is constantly being challenged by the people that aren't participating in Zillow, that, what you guys do is you take our listings and then you sell us back the leads. And people talk about paying referral fees. People talk about paying for leads on their listings. And, it's interesting, whenever you look at anything, you need to analyze what really happens, not look at anecdotal type of people's opinion, because people have all kinds of different opinions. In fact, in the U.S., half of them have one opinion, half have the other, right? It's crazy. But Zillow does not sell leads from your listing back to you. In fact, all that we have in Canada right now, just to clarify that again, is we have the ability to have all of our listings in Century 21 appear on Zillow for free. Any leads that are generated from those listings go directly to the listing agent for free. And what Zillow is doing is they're not a real estate company, so they never take referral fees. They will eventually charge for additional advertising in their Premier Agent program. And what this program does is it will always have the listing agent front and center on a listing, and then it will have other agents that are bidding like they do on Zillow, or no, on Google. I said Gillow. Sorry, I got Zillow and Google mixed up there. Where did that word come from? Okay, that's a combination of the two.
That's
right.
Good.
So on Google, where you bid and for advertising, you'll have the same system for that paid advertising on Zillow. It, however, will not be implemented for well over a year before that will happen. So what we have an opportunity as a Century 21 agent is we, for the first couple of weeks, we're the only company that provided listing data on Zillow. The reason for that is that we took a position that this is going to be a great place to advertise. It's going to be great for our sellers because,
most importantly,
they have 180,000 or 180 million visitors a month, and let's get that exposure. And there's no charge for that exposure. The other thing is that not all companies, brands, franchises have a Canadian-wide website like Century 21 Canada did or has, and are able to do that deal where they provide all the listings in Canada. That's what allowed us to get on there first. And there's still many MLSs that are not set up to provide that listing data. So what will happen with smaller companies or companies that don't have a company-wide website, they will have to have their local board provide the listings of theirs to Zillow. And when that all gets worked out, we will do the same with our listings, but we will still also feed from our Century 21 Canada website, which is a synchronized site going across Canada. So that gives us a huge advantage. We can put coming soon listings, we can put our new construction listings. There's all kinds of advantages. And we need to really work, as we talked about in our management meeting, is work to explain to our agents how this all works so that we can take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Right? And I was saying as well, I don't know if I said this at the meeting, but with these new initiatives that we have with Century 21, Zillow being one of them, I have a listing. I don't really sell real estate, but I have a relative that has provided a listing to me, so I've got to do it. And I'm getting leads from Zillow already. I'm getting leads from Back At You Media, which is another Century 21 initiative. I got those without spending any money. Yep. And I now just did a little experiment where I spent $82 to boost my posts and see if I get anything different from that. So have we presented those things in our office meetings yet?
Absolutely.
Or how are we finding?
Back at You, again, yesterday I was on a bit of a mission to go over all the things that we have. And but it's a work in process. Like I've got some agents, like using Back At You, I use the analogy, it's like put it in the oven and let it go and it cooks itself, right? But they
but I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah,
I like that.
Put it in the oven, shut the door, and there it goes. But the moral of the story is absolutely, Paul, because that's one of the things that we have so many opportunities at Century 21 that, you got to keep reminding them, and that was the opportunity we had at yesterday's sales meeting to go clearly. Don't forget your Back At You Media. We went over Zillow. We went over, not to go on and on, but all the training and whatever. But the Back At You is still new, but you've got to say, well, look, this is great because automatically your listings are going on the social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's all set up that way. And the theory is lead gen, because this is what everyone talks about. How do I get leads? So we have the systems there. So that's what we presented at the meeting as well. I'm sure.
It's the same thing. And I think what's great with Back At You Media, for those of you that don't know how it works, it's once you register, it's automatic. So all of your listings that are on Century 21 will get posted on social media. So on Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and one other one, Twitter maybe. Anyways, what I love about it that I think is great is once you register, there's nothing else to do. And at the very basic, you will have a social media presence for your listings. And for those that want to do more, like you said, Paul, you can just juice it up, right? You can apply a budget and say, hey, you know what? This is working. I'm getting activity here. I don't want just the basics. I want to, apply an advertising budget to it. And for relatively low amount of money, you can get more activity there. Yep. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. Yeah. Right?
I also think that when you look at stuff like social media, agents always look at it. That's a good idea, and they do a little bit, and then you look at their pages, and you haven't seen a post since 2016 because their intentions are good, but it's hard to keep up with that stuff. So it is a basic program, but it is an automated program, and I think that's what makes it so important. And that is the place to start. And certainly, if you are going to become a social media guru and that's your thing, there's other things that you can do. But if you're looking for a place to start, this is where everybody can start, and everybody can have their stuff showing up. And it's interesting. So this goes back to looking at the alternative feature sheet that we used to have with CREA, right? So the Realtor.ca used to allow us to automatically have any consumer that looked at our listing automatically come to our website, and the impact of that is phenomenal. So we first started with that, where we just said to our agents, hey, you should go on to MLS when you load your listing, and you should set this up, because if you do this, you will get a bunch more leads directly to your website. Yeah. So when we implemented that, we saw a handful of agents do it, but not enough. So then we as a company decided that what we would do is we would take the initiative to do this on behalf of all of our agents.
Correct.
So we look at something as simple as we're going to automatically have anybody that looks like a listing on Realtor.ca go directly to our agent's website. So we didn't have them come to our company website. We had it go to Anthony's website, Tass's website, any particular agent's website. We went from about 400 people that visited our website a month from Realtor.ca to 40,000 a month. Yeah. So, Century 21 Leading Edge, we had, at that time when we implemented that, average of 3,000 listings. 3,000 listings, do the math. What's that? That's seven views per listing per month. That's all it took to get 40,000, right? Because right? Did I do the math right there?
Close.
Close. Yeah. I think so,
it's
right?
12 views.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it was, yeah.
I said close.
But that's
close.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was quite right, but that's okay. Can't do math on the spot. But the lesson learned there was that when you do something in a big way, there is a huge impact. Yeah. Now, Realtor.ca decided that they were the ones that should be controlling the traffic and the eyeballs for the consumer, and that they're a consumer site now. As a board, we fought that. As an industry with the Century 21, we fought that to no avail. We even had trips to meetings with CREA to try to talk to them about it, and didn't make any headway. So a couple of things that have changed is a little bit of plug for Treb Home. So Treb Home is the newly launched Toronto Real Estate Board public-facing website. And some people say, well, Toronto Real Estate Board is competing with me. Well, you could say that they are, However, the Toronto Real Estate Board has turned on that alternative feature sheet, and if you set that up on Treb Home, your listing will automatically go to your website if they view it on Treb Home. So now we look at, and sorry for monopolizing conversation here, guys.
It's very knowledgeable.
Cut me
great
off.
info.
It's
No,
very
Every
knowledgeable.
time.
No.
So the other sort of point on this is that when we look at going back to Zillow, so why does Zillow have 180 million visitors a month?
Why?
Yeah. Why do they have so many visitors?
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Because that's where the public wants to go, because they have all the information.
Okay.
I think that's the way the public views it. I go to Zillow and it's accurate and it has everything.
It's like a one-stop shop. It's one place to go.
Yeah. So they really don't have all the information. They certainly, in terms of all boards, don't provide listing data to them. They have actually indexed all 110 million homes in the
they
U.S.
have all
so
of
they
the
have
homes.
all of the homes, right? They don't necessarily have all of the real
listings.
estate data. But what they have done is they have spent billions of dollars on the technology, on building a experience for the consumer that is far better than any other experience that is out there. And that combined with the data, right? So it is content and then building something
The
that is
experience.
user-friendly
Yep.
and the experience that's there, right?
Yep.
So, when you look at a couple of examples, and I'm not on Zillow's payroll, but a couple of examples of how they use artificial intelligence. If you search on Zillow, and Anthony, when you go on to Zillow, you always seem to spend a lot of time on the photos of the kitchens, right? What Zillow then does is every time that you look at a listing on Zillow, it will serve you up the picture of the kitchen first.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
through
knows what's
artificial
important.
intelligence.
It knows what's important to you, or
Yeah.
what you've clicked on the most,
Yeah.
and directs you
Unbelievable.
accordingly.
It's,
That's mind-boggling
Yeah.
that it can do
It's
that.
hard, it's hard to believe.
Yeah, and when we look at, when they first started to deal with the Zestimate in the U.S., and I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm actually going to Texas again next week with the T3 group. We're going to look at the trends report that's coming out soon, and they had with Zillow, they had an error rate of close to 13%. So the error in the Zestimate was 13%. And agents say, yeah, it's crap, they don't know what they're doing. They've now got the Zestimate down to an error rate of 4.8%, which is pretty phenomenal for a computerized model that figures out the value of a home.
And, Paul, for everybody that doesn't know what a Zestimate is,
Yeah,
right?
please, yeah.
So a Zestimate basically on Zillow is you can plug in an address and it's going to tell you what that property is worth. And it's all automated, like Paul mentioned, but they have gotten it to the point where it's only off, or the variance is 4% compared to it used to be 12%.
Yeah,
right?
4.8 right now. Yeah.
4.8.
Yeah.
So that's pretty damn accurate for not being in the
So
property.
the consumer can just go in
Yeah,
and say, here's
you
my
have to look
address.
at it this way, Anthony.
Yeah.
That's without even seeing the inside of the house. So
Right.
so that's to
Could be
me
more,
an acceptable variable without seeing the inside of the house. It gives you a pretty damn good idea. That's what this house is
But
worth.
then the theory is you need to have a real estate agent, a realtor,
Precisely.
come in. Okay, honey, according to Zestimate, my house is worth $850,000. But let's have the realtor come in and take a look, because we've done this, we've done that.
Yep.
We've got a finished basement, we've got a pool. So, but the moral of the story is the consumer can just go in and see what the Zestimate is or the price of their house is.
Yep.
Right, and again, Zillow doesn't try to take the realtor out of the equation,
Right.
because Zillow gets paid by the realtor. The realtor is who pays Zillow for advertising.
Right.
So they're not trying to get rid of the realtor, they're trying to help the realtor.
Yep.
So it is a tool to assist it, but they make it very, very clear that if you're interested in selling, you need to have a realtor actually come into the house, look at the attributes, look at the length of the nails on the roof and all those important things that come into the valuation. But it is amazing that they're able to get it that accurate. And what they're doing as well as a company is they've created a contest. So maybe our friends at Vendetta can tell us what this is called. You probably know off the top of your head what this is called.
Of course.
So when you have a contest to do something, is it source marketing or? So what they're doing is they have a contest where they have said to everybody out there in the world, you create some software to improve our Zestimate by 1/2%. So from 4.8 to 4.3. And the winner of that contest, they're going to pay $1 million to for doing that. So what they've done, I think, is it called crowdsource funding or?
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I thought you would just know that one off the top.
It took me a second
There
based
you
on
go.
the definition.
There you go. So what they do when they do something like that is they've got all kinds of different companies working on this and competing to do the best job. It's a really neat way to get something done and to find the best at it. So that's happening right now. So they're hoping to bring that Zestimate down. Now, what they also do is they have indexed all 110 million homes in the U.S. They will index all the homes in Canada. So what that means is that even if a home is not for sale, there is a record on Zillow as to what happens. So you are thinking of selling. You can go on to Zillow and see that your house that is not for sale has been viewed 36 times. So you can gauge the amount of interest in your home even when you haven't put it on the market. So it is really a tool, if you embrace it, in order to help realtors do a better job, right? And really, it is the marketing, it is the negotiating, it's the other thing now that the realtor has to get involved with because they're not the keepers of the information. And that's clear with a company like Zillow. But what I was also getting at with this is when you have competition, when you have a company like Zillow come into the Canadian marketplace, you now have Realtor.ca working their behinds off and CREA working their behinds off to bring more value to Realtor.ca. Because with competition comes improvements from everybody. Because you either improve and compete
or die on the vine.
Or you die on the vine, right? Talking about the grapes, right? You die on the vine, which is more of the Amarone, where they let the grape die on the vine, and then it actually shrivels up before they make the wine. You know the process for making an Amarone. That's the good Italian wine. So what we're gonna do on the wine front, if you guys can finish that first glass, what did you think of the Takai? I like it better than the
I
Sauternes?
actually do like it, but I think the first one, Paul, is really, that's a dessert. Like you could have a little glass of that, and that's your dessert. I find the second one a little bit thinner, almost not as syrupy, not quite as sweet, but sweet enough that you could have this with something else, right?
Yeah, it was that's the best. Yeah.
Cheers, boys. So what I find with Takai is Takai is a little bit more, to me, a little bit more with the lemony and more citrusy than
the second one.
Yeah, the second one is more citrusy, so it's not as sweet, right? And I think it's more of an easy sipping wine. You could drink a little bit more of this than you could the Sauternes, right? But both quite nice. So what we're going to do next on the wine front, because we're looking at dessert wines, one of my other favorite wines in my cellar is port.
You have a lot of favorites.
I have a lot of favorites. Yeah. So it's like my favorite, and then my other favorite, and then my other favorite, right? So when we look at port, there's two types of port. I primarily drink vintage port, and vintage port is kind of like champagne in that it is only made in certain years when the harvest is amazing. So when you look at champagne and you see the vintage champagne, it's only in certain years. Did you guys ever notice that? It's not every year. You don't get a 10, 11, a 12, right? Because they, in champagne, they declare it a vintage year, and that's the year that they have vintage champagne from. And the same is true with port. So in certain years, and amazing years for port, 1970, 1977, 1983, 1997, 2000, all amazing years in port, for vintage port. And then what they do is, in all of the years that they don't make vintage port, that's when they make tawny port. Okay, so what tawny port is, and what we've got today is we've got a 10-year-old Taylor Feldgate tawny port. So what a 10-year-old tawny port means is that the average age of the grapes in this port is 10 years old. So you could have grapes that are 7 years old, you could have grapes that are 12 years old. The average age is 10 years old. So what they're doing is they're taking the grapes from some of the vintage years as well, if they didn't use them all in the vintage ports, to make up these tawny ports. So they are very, very different, and we're going to try a tawny port first, and then we're going to try, I actually brought a 2,000 grams vintage port, which is one of my favorites. I've got that in the fridge, because port, as these dessert wines, are really to be drank at refrigerator temperature, right? So more around 45 degrees Fahrenheit. What is that? 10 degrees Celsius is probably a good temperature for those type of wines. So if you guys have a clear glass.
Yeah. I do.
And you'll notice that with your tawny port, you'll see that it's a lot lighter than a vintage port. Which glass are we using? That one? Okay.
So the tawny port wouldn't have the sentiment that
No. So
vintage port has.
Right. Are you guys ready for some tawny? I don't want to rush. When you're ready, you let me know, and we'll give you some tawny port. So yeah, so tawny port is going to be filtered, right? And when you look at vintage port, I've actually, prior to the session today, I have opened the Graham's vintage port. I have filtered that through a coffee filter to take out the huge amount of sediment and what's called the lees in the wine, which is the yeast and all the fermentation all gathers, and that's in the bottle. And because it's older, you get a lot of crap. And in vintage port, sometimes people will be pouring it and think, oh, this is no good. Right. Like there's giant things of crap in it, right?
Pouring
right. I just had actually a Chateau Neuf last night that was, I think it was a 2004, so not that old, but huge amount of sediment and crap in it. And the vintage port, when I filtered it, just a huge amount of crap in it, like just way more than you've ever seen in most wines. And that's just the nature of port. So you want to decant it, and with port, if you pour it slowly, you're going to get most of it out, but I actually use a coffee filter, and I actually filter it through that coffee filter to get out all the sediment.
Good idea.
So let's give the tawny port a try. We're doing a little wine education here as well.
That's really nice. Wow.
It is tasty.
So that's nice.
That's very nice.
And I really don't have much of this in my cellar. This is not my port of choice. So this is good, but just wait till you try the vintage port. I know you guys have
really
tried it before.
Like they were all good, but I don't know if it's because it's on the red side of the. I'm a red wine drinker.
Yeah.
But I thought those were just amazing. But this is like.
Yeah. So and a 10-year-old tawny is lighter than vintage port, but you're going to see that get, as the older ones, you're going to see it even lighter, right? And it usually is lighter. And this one you never have to filter, because they're going to filter it when they do the tawny port. So you're not going to get that sediment in it. So if you're going to just open one up and pour it from the bottle, you're good to go.
Cheers.
Cheers. So I'll go grab the vintage port as well, and you guys can start talking on another topic. Maybe we'll take a question from the audience. Steve,
Let's do it.
do we have a question from the audience that?
We do also, in regards to what you were talking about before, I think I misspoke. It's crowdsourcing. Crowdfunding is a slightly
Crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing. Okay,
yes,
perfect.
exactly.
Yeah. I knew it was something like
We'll
that.
put
but-
something like that across the screen. All right,
Perfect.
so questions. We had a couple good ones come through. Some about the brokerage specifically, or some about the brokerage, some about you gentlemen specifically. So, number one, someone who presumably is thinking about coming to the brokerage. I'm not sure if they're a brand new agent or with someone else. But the question is, what kind of training and support can a new agent expect if interested in joining your brokerage? So, I guess just in regards to training, onboarding, just overall what those processes are.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of our strong points. I think we have a massive amount of training that's available for new agents and experienced agents. But I think right off the hop, we do classes on every Monday, which is our business strategies classes. So right off the hop, I think that's 9 segments that they can attend. And it runs all year round, and they're all individual topics, so you don't have to start at class 8 or class 9. So that's great. In addition to that, we've got Rob Vivian, obviously, which is a company coaching program that all agents are able to participate in, and that's a monthly coaching class combined with some videos and a morning wake-up call from Rob, which kind of gets you going. So that's fantastic. We also have something that's relatively new, which is our concierge program, which that's all about the onboarding. So getting agents, whether they're new to the business or just new to Century 21, understanding and having access to all of the tools that Century 21 provides. So that, I think, is really important, because right off the hop, we truly have the best tools out there. Technology-wise, Century 21 is incredible, but that's useless if people don't embrace it. And part of embracing it is knowing it, right? So the idea with the concierge is having the agents introduced to all of the different things that Century 21 provides. And getting them going on it, right? So right off the hop, even with Century 21, they're going to get emails as a new agent, directing them to all the different tools that Century 21 provides, right? So there's definitely a lot of stuff there, for onboarding and training, right? And that's just, I'll let you talk about some of the other stuff, Anthony.
No, that's right.
Rich Robbins and Kathleen Black and all that, right?
And what you mentioned is the tip of the iceberg. The question I thought was related to a brand new agent, but the good thing is we have many experienced agents wanting to bring their business to higher levels, because that's one of the goals. They find, they're doing well at 100,000, they're doing well at 250, but they have a burning desire to be the best of the best. So you did segue that. In addition to the Monday classes and the concierge, if you're a new agent, which I believe the question was, from a management level, we do sort of one-on-ones to help the agent understand, because typically a brand new agent passed the course, but they're a little bit nervous because they'll call and say, I've got my first listing. Come on into the office, calm down, we'll go through all the paperwork, here's the listing presentation, and so on. I'm showing homes and I'm getting my first offer. So in addition, the support of the management is phenomenal for the one-on-ones. Getting back to the Rich Robbins, in fact, next Thursday, I believe is November 15th, is a series that Rich Robbins has, the Mastery Program, which again, not just for new agents, but it's also for experienced agents. And what an excellent time of year, incidentally, to put in a plug. You know, we're all talking about, whoa, this is great to do the series of lessons. It's a once a week, it's a commitment. You've got to attend once a week. It's a video presentation. In fact, Paul will be hosting it, and it's an amazing series. Kathleen Black has been an asset to our company, not just on team building, but on the real ways of dealing with people, and with Kathleen Black, and you can crystallize this for me, Paul. It's also been developed now with more role playing, and because again, in the real world, when you're going to meet on a listing presentation, you want to know what is the right steps. Like a good salesperson, yes, it can come natural, but there are steps and questions that you need to ask clients. So just in addition to what Tass has mentioned is that. Yeah. And when you do join Century 21, you'll get your initial welcome email, and you'll have access to Online Office. And Online Office has our CRM system. It has all the marketing. There's videos and training additionally on Online Office. So, you know, in hearing what Tass is saying and hearing him saying, it's just the tip of the iceberg, but nobody can come close to the training and the support that Century 21 offers.
I'm convinced. Where do I sign up?
There you are. I happen to have a pen ready.
You have a pen. You always do, Ed.
Just a follow up to that. It wasn't specifically part of the question, but I'm a numbers guy. Do you guys have any metrics with Century 21 versus kind of the industry standards in terms of units of production for agents, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure, yeah, and I'll take that because we've talked about that many times. So when we look at our agents that have gone through the training that we provide, we have an average income of $169,000. And then we look at the rest of the group that hasn't gone through the training, and then we have an average of like $86,000, right? So you basically, when you go through the training, you make more money. I don't know.
3 times
when you look at that, it's like, okay, so why not go through the training, right? What's the question?
Why wouldn't I want to be trained?
Yeah, why wouldn't I want to do that? So the other thing that was being asked there is compared to the industry, right? Yeah. So the industry, the average is only about 5 deals a year. At Century 21, we average 13 transactions a year. And overall, when we include everybody, so people that have taken the training and haven't taken the training, we're at about 109,000 as the average as a company, which is 4 times the industry average in terms of the average income out there. You know, the other thing I think that's important to talk about when you look at training, I attended the AREA Emerge conference today. And I'm going again next week to Texas for another conference, and I'm constantly conferencing. And what I'm trying to do is find best practices. What are the best things that we can bring to our agents? And you know, when you look at this presentation today, agents in general want the sexy things. Okay, and when I say the sexy things, they don't want to hear about cold calling. This is, in fact, most companies that sell leads or sell you the you never have to cold call systems are doing that because their systems involve you paying them money, and that's what everybody wants to do. So what's interesting with that is that if you and I look at it this way: if you have a batting average or a success ratio of 2 out of 10, you go on 10 appointments, you get 2 pieces of business. And let's say that it costs you $1,000 per appointment. Okay, so you go on 10 appointments, it costs you $10,000. Let's say that you make $36,000 from those 2 transactions. So you're spending 10, getting 36. Not bad, but not great. Now, if you just looked at let's actually look at spending 10, getting 40,000, so I can do the math when I change the numbers. Make it a little bit easier. So if you look at changing your batting average, where you close 8 out of 10 instead of 2 out of 10, you now quadruple your income. So now you make 160,000 for the 10 that you invested. And this, to me, is the biggest problem in the industry, is that everybody is focused on, how do I get leads?
Yeah.
How can I buy leads? How can I get leads without doing anything?
Yeah.
Right?
But they're not trained to close.
But they're not trained to close.
Yeah.
And what we know is that if you go through and you implement the Rob Vivian program, and you guys, did a great job overviewing the training, but if you do that, and it is meat and potatoes, it's how do you deal with the customer, right? If you do that, you will be successful. And in this conference, somebody said it this way, is that no matter what you're using, that's a tool, okay? And you can give anybody a hammer, okay, and put them on a roof with a bunch of shingles. And there's a lot of people that there's going to be a lot of leaks in that roof, right? So it's not the tool, it's how you teach them how to manage and operate that tool. And that's so important. And it just seems to be lost in our industry. Everybody wants sexy, newest, easiest, magic answer. Yeah, we really don't do magic. We, I guess you could pray. You could just pray, and I believe in prayer, but just not for listings, right? You can't pray yourself a listing. You need to learn how to use the tools. And the tools are great, and we have a lot of tools as well, but you absolutely have to learn how to use those tools. And the best carpenter is the one that knows how to use the tool. And sometimes they're using the fancy automated planing tool, and sometimes they're using, what's that one where you use by hand? What's that called again? I forget the name of it now. Just check it. Vendetta. What's the name of that? No, when you
Sawzall.
No. When you're doing woodworking, you're planing, right?
Oh, the
planer. It's called a plane.
The plane. Yeah.
It's called a plane. Okay, there you go. A plane. Right. Some are using a plane, and others are using fancy, tools to do this. But the craftsman is using those hand tools, right? So there's nothing wrong with knocking on doors.
Yeah. Or cold calling.
There's nothing wrong with cold calling,
yeah.
right? And everybody should learn how to do it, because, listen, interacting with clients is part of the business. And I'm constantly out on the road, going to different programs to try to find what our best practice is. And what I find in that search is that everybody is looking for a better tool, and nobody is looking at making themselves a better craftsman. And that's what we do at Leading Edge. That's what we would like to do with you. It is difficult to get that across to people. And I think that's the way we got to start presenting it to our people, is that it's not the tool. It's got to be the way that we craft it. Okay?
Yep, I agree.
So I'm going to pour you guys now a vintage port to compare against the tawny port. And I'll just get Vendetta, if you guys can just close up in on that, and you can see that this is the tawny port. You can see that that's just a lot lighter, and then the vintage port is a lot deeper. This one is a 10-year-old tawny port, and I guess a 2000 would make this an 18-year-old vintage port. So I'm going to pour out some vintage port for you guys, and you can see that it's a little bit of a darker, deeper color. And that sometimes will diminish when it's older, but vintage port, I probably have about, I have a lot of that in my cellar. Let's just put it that way. You want to try the tawny or the vintage? I think that you should try just a sip of this, and then go to the vintage port just to taste the difference. Right? So you've got now the vintage port.
Oh, it's nice. Yeah. It's very nice. Now this is the vintage one.
And this is the vintage one. Yeah. So
cheers.
Just try them. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, cheers.
Now the best food to go with the the vintage port is a cigar.
Oh,
Or I guess that's not really
Well,
a food,
I'll have to
but,
try to
but
find
it's,
one.
it's got a nice taste. Goes very well with a cigar. Also,
Chocolate.
port goes amazing with chocolate. Okay. Now, when we look at our Takai, okay, we have a friend of ours that is constantly baking peach pies, right? Especially when peaches are in season, and a peach pie with Takai. That's the little rhyme we go. So just amazing.
Peach pie and Takai.
And Takai, amazing together. Or even with the
Sounds like it'll
sauternes.
get you in
he was
trouble.
a poet and didn't even.
There you go, know it.
Right.
Or some baked pears, right?
Oh.
So with these lighter white dessert wines, those are amazing desserts with it. And then the chocolate or the molten lava cake, or a cigar. So cheers, boys. Now, do you guys like the vintage or the tawny? Do you have a preference? What do you think?
Definitely the vintage.
It's a notch up. Yeah, it's a bit richer. It's not quite as light.
Yeah.
But it's special.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very good.
So, do we have anything else to talk about, or are we just going to smoke the cigars?
I think with this, I need a cigar.
There you go. Do we have any other questions?
Questions,
We
Steve?
do have a couple questions here.
Shoot.
So, one which I think you guys kind of covered was, can you help clarify the recent agreement between Zillow and Century 21? I think you've kind of, kind of covered that, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add. Next one, I'm guessing somebody who's seen the podcast before. Anthony, out of your cars, which one is your favorite?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a very tough question.
You gotta pick one.
I have to pick which car is my favorite.
No cop-out answers and saying all of them equally.
That is a very difficult
Drum
question.
roll.
I have to. You made me pick one. Like, I love them all for their own reasons. Like, I was going to say the '66 Sunbeam, but I've just got a real liking to the BMW.
Gotcha.
I love them all. You asked me to pick one. I may just slant to the 635 BMW.
Oh, okay. What year is it again?
It's a 1985.
1985 635.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very good.
I'm sorry, boys and girls. I love you all.
They're not your kids.
Okay,
That's
okay.
right. That's right.
They don't talk back.
I always like to put it this way: that's your favorite, and then your other favorite.
Yeah,
is,
that's right.
This one, then your other favorite
right.
is
It's
this
true,
one.
because I love them all.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's when you're
Absolutely.
car crazy.
We also had another one come through for Paul, and funny enough, this is a question I've been meaning to ask you, and I haven't gotten around to it. So, I've heard you say on multiple occasions your favorite wine is Chateau Neuf de Pape. Why, and what is your all-time favorite that you've tried of that style?
Okay, so I like Anthony. It's hard to pick a favorite, but I guess I have the most Chateau Neuf de Pape in my cellar, and I think that the favorite Chateau Neuf de Pape that I had was a Chateau de Beaucastle from 1998. So that was an amazing year for Chateau Neuf. We actually had that at, I had a Jeroboam of that, which is a 6,000 liter bottle.
Cherry bomb.
No, not
No,
6,000.
6,000 milliliters. 6,000 milliliters, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's a big cherry
That's
bomb.
eight bottles of wine in one bottle.
Yeah, so
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
like this.
it's a big bottle. It's a big bottle. And that was a 1998, which is an amazing year for Chateau Neuf.
That must have took a
And-
whole night to drink.
No, I had a group of people. I didn't do it myself. But I think that the Chateau Neuf, the grape in there is the Syrah, which from Australia is known as the Shiraz. It's the same grape. They just call it a little bit of a different name. But I just find that to be just a very flavorful, goes well. I love that when I'm having a pork loin for dinner. Just an amazing wine to have with that. and it's just always been my favorite. And talking about the Chateau de Beaucastel, I just picked up, I believe it was the 2015, which we'll have to wait a few more years to try on our podcast here, but I think a wine rated 98 out of 100.
Wow.
So just an amazing rating.
Amazing.
And just a great wine. And just like the cars, Anthony, I then have my other favorites, right?
That's it.
So I have a lot of different favorites. And the idea is also with wine is it wouldn't be my favorite if I'm going to have a pasta, a bolognese sauce, right? Then I'm going to want, you know, a nice Italian Brunello or a Barolo, and you're going to have something different. But also with the Chateau Neuf, great wine to have with lamb chops, right? And I love lamb chops, especially from Peter's, and we're going to look at maybe doing a shoot at that restaurant, and we'll maybe have a Chateau Neuf de Pape and some lamb chops. And I don't think we want to do the podcast while we're eating, but maybe we'll eat first and then do it, or eat after.
We'll break. We'll break in between.
We'll break in between and have dinner.
Lamb chops you can just eat, you know.
Yeah, you can eat. Yeah, my kids call it meat on a stick.
Yeah.
Meat on a
right?
stick. That's right. That's right.
Here, hold the bone for me.
How are we doing
great.
time-wise? Are we? We're
over
okay.
an hour.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
Perfect. So I think that we'll with that we'll sign off. But before I do, I'd like to encourage everybody to email us directly. Do we put a Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook's the best place.
Yeah, Facebook, or comment on the podcast, asking any questions, any information that you guys would like in the real estate
any
business.
Suggestions for topics for us to talk
love
about
that.
would be great.
Yeah, topics, any guests that you think we should have on, and any information that you need.
Yeah.
The idea is that we're here to help and answer questions, and we'd love to get more of your feedback, so that we know what to ask. So I'd like to thank you guys very much. It was a great night. Enjoyed the port and the dessert wines. And I'm Paul Barron, broker owner of Century 21 Leading Edge, saying good night.
Thanks again, everybody. I'm Tassis Giannakakis, and thank you, Paul, for bringing all of these great wines. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Anthony Bungaro, and I'd like to give a little toast. Cheers to everyone.
And cheers to Vendetta.
Cheers.
For the amazing job that they do as well with our podcast. Cheers, guys.
Way to go, guys.
Salud, sir.
Salute.
Salute?
Salud.
Salud. Salud. Let's drink.
And then sell. That's our new.
Yeah, sell.
That's our new toast.
Salud.
Salute.